Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video.
So I've been living alone for almost a year now after my divorce, and I had no idea that my mother-in-law was doing this. The house I live in is the one I got in my divorce. I never thought about selling it or buying a new place as I was never pressed for money, and the house was in a very convenient neighborhood. All the necessities were within 5 to 10 minutes driving distance, and the crime rates in Maine are the best all over the country. So it was a win-win in my case. Well, that's until I started noticing a few things that were amiss. Whenever I had to go out for a few days on business trips, I'd come back to things being out of place and missing groceries. At first, I blamed the stress and my bad memory. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me and things weren't as bad as they seemed. So I didn't take any immediate action. But I started paying attention to smaller things. I started keeping stock of the groceries and other household supplies before I went on a business trip. I wanted to be sure that I don't have any reason to be concerned, and I was just being paranoid. But when I came back from my trip, I noticed how things were different, but it was very hard to tell. They were all subtle changes, like the pickle jar was emptier than I thought, or a few packs of my midnight snacks would be missing. Because I only kept track of what I had and what I completely ran out of, I doubted myself again. Also, I noticed that the electrical units I consumed whenever I went out didn't quite match my monthly consumption. Instead of saving up on electricity, I was somehow consuming more power. All these things are something no one would even notice on a day to day basis because of how insignificant they were. But I always noticed small changes, and it was hard to say whether I was going insane or something was really wrong. So I decided that just to be at peace mentally, I needed to install a CCTV cameras. And the next time I had a gut feeling that something was wrong, or I could just go through the footage and relieve my paranoid self. So my last business trip was about 3 weeks ago, and I called a security company a few days before leaving to install the CCTV. They took care of everything and told me how I can access the footage on my phone. It was quite easy, and honestly, I should have gotten them way sooner, seeing how I live alone. Anyway, I went on the trip. It was a 15-day overseas schedule this time because we were working with someone in Paris. I actually work in production, and these international shoots were quite common in my line of work. Because I belong to a company that provides crew to any individualistic artists or directors, we always have to work on team projects. So we travel as a team, and even if a particular member's work can be finished earlier than others, we can't leave until the whole team is done. So even though I usually work after a shoot is done, I had to go with the whole team and stay there from the beginning. So when I came back after 15 days of overseas work, at first I was too tired to pay attention to anything wrong. But over the next 2 days, I again saw a few of the groceries missing. This time, someone has definitely been to my house because the trash bag was full, even though I took out the trash before I went for the trip. And even my Netflix account was being weird and showing me shows in my watch list that I've definitely not watched. So I decided to check out the cameras, and guess what I found? My ex mother in law, who I haven't talked to for over a year, was walking around my house like she owns the place. The shocking thing was that she didn't have to break into the house and had her own set of keys she used to let herself in. That explains why there was no evidence of any forced entries, and thus a cycle of me doubting myself for being overly paranoid. I went over the footage at 4 times speed and saw her come over the very next day after I left. She stayed there the whole time and even cooked in the kitchen. 2 days before I was going to come back, she put everything in its place and left the house. The chills I got from seeing her walk around my house without me having a single clue about it were pretty bad. I was scared to death because if she could do this, there could be more people who might have access to this house. It took me a while to process everything, but as soon as my brain started working again, I called the locksmith and asked them to change the locks. Because it was the weekend, they told me they'll be able to come on Monday morning at the earliest, and I spent 2 nights without sleeping a wink because of how scared I was. I kept a knife near me the whole time. Once the locks were changed, I was able to relax a little, and I finally was able to think about my ex mother in law's motives in coming over and staying at my place. But no matter how hard I fought, nothing made sense. So I called my ex husband and told him what had happened. I wanted to talk directly with my ex mother in law, but unfortunately, I didn't have her contact number. My ex husband was shocked to hear about what she had been doing and told me that he'll give her a call and ask her why she did that. But my main concern was how she got the second set of keys because I had the locks changed right after my divorce. It was a suggestion from a friend of mine, and since I got the house, I thought it was less awkward to get the locks changed instead of asking my ex to return his keys. And no matter how hard I tried to think that there must be a valid reason for her behavior, I can't stop the chain of thoughts in my mind. My ex still hasn't called me back and hasn't returned my calls, although it's been over 3 days. I also texted him to send me her contact information, but haven't received any response yet. So now I'm thinking of calling the cops and reporting her to them. But would that make me an a-hole because I'm not waiting to hear her side of the story and going to the authorities for something that could very well turn out to be not a very big deal? I hope you all remember my original post here about my ex-mother-in-law breaking into my house whenever I used to go out. Well, I have a very strong suspicion that my ex-husband is in on that whole thing with her. The first thing I did after finding out about my ex-mother-in-law was call Jack, my ex-husband, because I didn't have my mother-in-law's number. But even after 2 weeks, there was no response from Jack's side, and my dozen or so messages went unanswered. So finally, I lost my patience and contacted the cops about the whole situation. I originally wanted to give them a chance to explain themselves, but after they behaved, I don't owe them anything. I filed a complaint for breaking and entering, trespassing on private property, and possible stalking. I told them the whole situation and that I have doubts my ex-husband is an accomplice for the whole thing. I submitted the CCTV footage as evidence, and the cops reassured me they'll take care of the situation. Now I'm waiting to hear back from them. In the meantime, I'm thinking about filing for a restraining order, but I don't know if that's possible because there's only been one incident of my mother-in-law coming to my house that's been caught on camera. And I have no proof that my husband is also responsible for that. If you guys know of any way that could help me take care of this situation, do let me know in the replies. So I had to go to Vancouver for a few weeks again, and this time I didn't want to leave the house empty. There hasn't been any progress from the cops' side, and I haven't heard anything from Jack or my mother-in-law. I wasn't worried about the house much because I knew that there's a very rare chance any of them would harm the house. I was thinking more along the lines that this is a good chance of catching my mother-in-law in the act of breaking in and getting things moving if she's still determined to do so. So I asked my dad and my sister to stay at my place for a few days while I was gone. I told them if no one shows up in the first few days, they should go back to their lives. Of course, they knew the whole story, so they agreed to help. And just as I thought my mother-in-law hadn't learned her lesson, in my second week of staying in Vancouver, I received a call from my sister, and she told me that my mother-in-law was arrested that night by the cops. It was around 11 p.m. when she tried to get into the house, but the locks were changed, so she couldn't really just walk in. So she tried to break in through the kitchen window that doesn't have any bars. Thankfully, my sister was awake and she saw my mother-in-law walking in on the door cam. She immediately called the cops, and by the time my mother-in-law could realize her mistake, the cops came and arrested her. They asked for me, but unfortunately, I'm stuck here for another 12 days. I was thankful that my sister was safe, and she told the cops everything and was able to get things moving. I would have preferred my dad taking the charge, but he went back to his house a few days ago, so my sister has had to deal with everything. I hope by the time I go back, my mother-in-law will be facing a trial. I know it's been a long time since I updated here, but honestly, I've been so busy lately that everything has been a non-stop mess. My mother-in-law's trial went on for 4 days, and she was charged with breaking and entering in 2 separate occasions. Unfortunately, we couldn't prove that my ex-husband was involved with her, but I'll have to worry about him later. We found out during the trial that my mother-in-law actually called a locksmith telling him that she lost the keys to her house and is locked out now. She asked him for a new set so she could get back in. What helped her was the timing of the whole situation. It was only a few weeks after my divorce, and one of my neighbors, who didn't know about my personal life for obvious reasons, recognized her and confirmed to the locksmith that she indeed is one of the residents of the house. She actually kept tabs on my schedule by calling the company and asking them for information about their schedules. It's quite easy to get the information because we take bookings from many unknown artists, and it's common for us to talk about the dates we're booked for. I still don't know why she did all this, but I'm glad that she was sentenced to a $2,000 fine and 2 years in prison. I hope she rots in there. I also talked with the head of my team and asked her to point out the lack of security of their employees in our next board meeting. I hope they work out a way to give us more privacy. NTA, no way you're an a-hole here. I also think that your husband could be the one who got her a fresh set of keys, and maybe he also sometimes comes with her to the house when you're out on trips. NTA, you're definitely not overly paranoid or an a-hole. Trust your gut and file that complaint. Get a restraining order against them too, so the next time they even think about coming near you, they'll go straight to prison. I, 27 female, am a Brit, American, who moved to the US 6 months ago. Since I grew up in England, I have a British accent. Anyway, my coworker recently invited me to a party, and I was very excited to hear someone else speaking with a British accent. Apparently, she was a friend of my coworker and visiting him for a couple of weeks. When I heard her talking, I said, "Hey, I'm British too. Where are you from?" She gave me kind of a weird look and said, not very nicely, "I'm not British. I'm from Syria, but I've lived in London since I was 4." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I assumed you were British. I was just excited to hear the accent after 6 months here. Anyway, what's London like?" She gave me another weird look and said, "Why are you asking me about London?" I said, "Oh, I thought you'd know it well since you've lived there for a while. I actually grew up a long way from London. I've only been there a few times, so I don't know it very well." She said, "You should be asking me what Syria's like." I said, "Okay, what's Syria like?" She said, "Never mind. I'm not talking to some racist bitch who thinks everyone with a British accent is British." I said, "Okay, apologies again," and walked away. Later, my coworker came up to me. Apparently, his friend had told him about our conversation. He said my assumption that his friend was British had offended her because she felt like her identity as a Syrian was being erased. He asked me to apologize to his friend. I told him that I had already apologized a couple of times and didn't think it was necessary to do so again. But I said I completely understood that she felt her identity was being erased, but I was just excited to hear the accent. But I'd be more mindful in the future. My coworker then got visibly annoyed. He'd been pretty calm up to this point and said that I shouldn't be making excuses like, "Oh, I was excited to hear the accent," to get away from erasing someone's identity. I said it wasn't an excuse, but an explanation. At this point, I felt the conversation was going in a bad direction and that I was no longer welcome at the party, so I excused myself and went home. Since then, my coworker has been completely ignoring me at work. Is what I did really so awful? Did I make a huge faux pas in terms of what's acceptable in the US? In my mind, it would have been way worse to assume she wasn't British just based on the fact that she wasn't white. Am I way off base here? NTA. She's lived in London, England since she was 4 years old. Last time I checked, England was part of the United Kingdom and therefore British. What is King Charles III doing over there? In any case, I can understand why she was upset you didn't notice she was Syrian. However, that doesn't mean she's not also British. NTA, she is a drama queen. Yes, she was born in Syria, but she grew up in London, so she is from there too. A quick, "Oh, I'm from Syria actually, but grew up in London," wasn't a hard response from her. You didn't do anything wrong. She was the one who made things awkward. Your friend, coworker, seems just as a drama queen as her if he is that petty of not talking to you for something so small. Find better friends, coworkers to hang out if you can. So I, 30s female, don't particularly like carrot cake. I've tried it in the past and it's not the worst thing ever, but I'm not the most svelte person on the planet, and I just don't think it's worth the calories for me. We were discussing desserts at work a few weeks ago, just normal random small talk, and one person mentioned carrot cake as a good dessert, so I started making some jokes about it being something that shouldn't exist. Like how people make the joke about oatmeal raisin cookies being a lie because they look like chocolate chip. Basically that, but with carrot cake being a dishonest cake. It got the expected amount of chuckles for an objectively mediocre workplace joke, and no one seemed offended or upset at the time. Well, last week, my birthday rolls around, and the person who'd mentioned carrot cake walks in proudly with a huge, homemade, beautifully iced carrot cake that says, "Happy Birthday," my name, on it. Our workplace generally does birthday celebrations for the team, but with a store bought cake that isn't personalized, so I was a little confused. My coworker explained that she made it because once I tried her carrot cake, I'd love it and change my mind because I probably just hadn't had a good one before. Honestly, though, it's not a matter of good one or bad one. I just don't like tasting carrots when I'm eating cake. It messes with my brain a little. So I took the smallest piece I could manage and tried to subtly scrape off the icing to try that part so I could compliment on her on that part. But she noticed I hadn't eaten any of the cake itself after a minute or two and called me a bitch for refusing to take a taste. My coworker explained that she made it because once I tried her carrot cake, I'd love it and change my mind because I probably just hadn't had a good one before. Honestly, though, it's not a matter of good one or bad one. I just don't like tasting carrots when I'm eating cake. It messes with my brain a little. So I took the smallest piece I could manage and tried to subtly scrape off the icing to try that part so I could compliment on her on that part. But she noticed I hadn't eaten any of the cake itself after a minute or two and called me a bitch for refusing to take a taste. Our coworkers are split. Some are saying I should have just tried it because one bite won't kill me. They know I'm not allergic or anything. And others are saying I was right to refuse since I'd already said I didn't like it. Like I said at the start, this is the pettiest thing of all time. But now I'm wondering if I should go apologize to my coworker since she did work hard on the cake. NTAOP, it's not a gift to bring the only hated kind of cake as the birthday cake. You owe no one an apology. You were more gracious than I would have been. This coworker basically cost you the option of having some cake you would have actually liked on your birthday. That's sad. Feel free to ask your fellow coworkers how they would feel getting their only disliked birthday cake flavor for their birthday. No one would be thrilled about that. Your coworker was pretty insulting to you, insisting you had to indulge her desire for you to like a hated type of cake on your birthday. NTA, saying you don't love something or eat something shouldn't be taken as a challenge to someone else to change your mind. What a weird flex, like she's some master baker who can magically change an adult's mind about something they've tasted before and don't like. And to do so on your birthday when you might have wanted to indulge yourself and in front of your coworkers. I love carrot cake, but everyone has different taste. NTA, your coworker brought you a carrot cake knowing full well that you do not like carrot cake, then called you out of your name for refusing to eat something you've been very vocal about not liking. You're not a 6-year-old refusing to try a new food. You're an adult who knows what you like and what you don't. Why does she think she knows better than you? Wildly condescending. Report her to HR for calling you a bitch.